Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human ship Meridian. The stars outside looked peaceful, but Jake knew the galaxy was anything but calm. He had been exploring space for 10 years now, and every day brought new surprises. Communication panels started beeping. Jake walked over to see what was happening. The signals were coming from far away, somewhere near the edge of known space. "Dr. Crawford, can you come to the bridge?" Jake called into his comm device. Dr. Lisa. Crawford arrived within minutes. She was the ship's expert on alien life forms and languages. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her eyes looked tired from working late into the night. "What do you have for me, Commander?" Lisa asked as she sat down at the fend. "Communication station. We're getting signals from the Zelani system." "They don't sound normal," Jake replied. Lisa began working on the alien message. The Zelani were known throughout the galaxy as healers. They looked like large plants that could walk and talk. For hundreds of years, they had helped other species with their advanced medicine. Many worlds owed their lives to Zelani doctors. After 20 minutes of work, Lisa's face turned pale. "Commander, you need to hear this." She played the translated message through the bridge speakers. The voice sounded weak and desperate. "This is Elder Sage Photon of the Zelani Collective. We send this message to anyone who will listen. A terrible sickness has come to our world. Our people are dying by the millions. We have tried everything we know, but nothing works. The disease attacks only us. We do not understand how this is possible. Please, if anyone receives this message, we need help. Our medical knowledge means nothing against this plague. Time is running out." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Zelani were the galaxy's best doctors. If they couldn't cure themselves, the situation was very bad. How long ago was this message sent? Jake asked. Lisa checked her instruments. "About 6 days ago. But Commander, there's more. I'm picking up similar messages from other Zelani colonies. This isn't just happening on their home world." Jake immediately called Captain Ryan Foster to the bridge. Foster was the ship's commanding officer, a man in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. He had fought in several space battles, but preferred peaceful missions. When Foster arrived, Lisa played the message again. The captain listened without saying a word. When it finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "How many Zelani are there in the galaxy?" Foster asked. "About 50 million across 12 worlds," Lisa answered. "But if this plague is spreading as fast as these messages suggest, that number is dropping quickly." Foster walked to the large window that looked out into space. "The Zelani saved my daughter's life 15 years ago. She was dying from a disease that human doctors couldn't cure. A Zelani healer on Earth Station worked for 3 days straight to save her." Jake remembered hearing this story before. Foster's daughter was now a doctor herself, inspired by the Zelani who had saved her. "Set course for the Zelani home world," Foster ordered. "Best possible speed." "Sir, that will take us through Galactic Council space." "We should probably ask for permission first," said Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, the ship's engineer. Foster shook his head. "We can ask for permission while we travel. Right now, every minute counts." The Meridian changed direction and began moving toward Zelani space. The ship's engines hummed as they pushed the vessel faster than it was supposed to go. Jake sent a message to Earth Command and the Galactic Council. He explained the situation and requested emergency clearance to enter Zelani space. The response came back faster than expected, but it wasn't what they hoped to hear. "Earth Vessel Meridian, this is Galactic Council control. The Zelani system has been declared under emergency quarantine. No ships are allowed to enter or leave the area. Return to your previous course immediately." Foster read the message and frowned. "Send another message. Tell them we're offering humanitarian aid. We're not traders or tourists." Jake sent the new message and waited. This time, The response took longer to arrive. When it came, it was from a high-ranking council member. Commander Morrison, this is Counselor Thane of the Korath Empire. Your offer of assistance has been noted and rejected. The humans are too young and inexperienced to deal with this crisis. The Council has experts working on the problem. Your interference would only make things worse. You are ordered to stay away from Zelani space. Lisa looked angry. Too young? Humans have been exploring space for over a century. To them, that's nothing, Foster said sadly. Some of these species have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. They see us as children playing with dangerous toys. Jake studied the star charts. Captain, even if we ignore their orders, it will take us 5 days to reach Zelani space. By then, ... By then, it might be too late, Foster finished. But we're going anyway. The Yelani have helped everyone in this galaxy at some point. Now they need help, and everyone is turning their backs on them. The ship continued toward Zelani space. Jake sent regular updates to Earth Command, but the responses became less frequent. He could tell that important people on Earth were having serious discussions about what to do. Dr. Crawford spent her time studying everything she could find about Zelani biology. If they were going to help, she needed to understand how their bodies worked and how this disease might be attacking them. Commander, she said during one of their evening briefings, I've been thinking about this plague. The message said it only attacks Zelani. That's very strange. Natural diseases usually affect multiple species, especially ones that are biologically similar. What are you suggesting? Jake asked. I'm suggesting this might not be natural at all. Someone might have created this disease specifically to hurt the Zelani. The idea was horrifying, but it made sense. Jake had learned that the galaxy was full of politics and hidden conflicts. Maybe someone wanted the Zelani gone. As the Meridian raced through space, more messages arrived from the Council. Each one was more threatening than the last. They were told that helping the Zelani would result in serious consequences for Earth and all human colonies. Foster gathered his senior officers for a meeting. We all know what we're facing. The Council doesn't want us to help, and Earth Command is staying quiet. If we continue, we might be on our own. The right thing isn't always the easy thing, said Lieutenant Beth Williams, the communications officer. My grandmother always told me that. Jake looked around the room at his fellow humans. They were scared, but they were determined. The Zelani had always helped others when they were needed. Now it was time for someone to help them. The Meridian continued its journey towards Zelani space, carrying the hopes of a species that the galaxy had apparently decided to abandon. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center on Luna Station, watching the large screens that showed ships moving throughout human space. She had been in charge of Earth's deep space fleet for 8 years, and she had never seen a situation like this one. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session, and the news was not good for the Zelani. Kate read each report carefully, and with each one, her anger grew. The Altarian Republic had voted to support the quarantine. Just 50 years ago, the Zelani had saved their entire species from a deadly virus. Now they were turning their backs on their saviors. The Centauri Federation was even worse. They had actively voted to keep the quarantine in place. The Zelani had helped them grow food on worlds that were supposed to be impossible to farm. Without Zelani knowledge, millions of Centauri colonists would have starved. Admiral, called Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner from his station. We're getting a transmission from Earth. President Cooper wants to speak with you. Kate walked to her private office and activated the secure communication link. President Dan Cooper appeared on the screen. He looked tired and worried. Kate, I need to know the status of our deep space fleet. How many ships can we move quickly? If we need to? We have 47 ships ready for immediate deployment, Kate replied. But sir, if you're thinking about helping the Zilani, the Council has made their position very clear. Cooper rubbed his temples. I've been in meetings for the past 12 hours. Half my advisors think we should stay out of this completely. The other half think we should help, but do it quietly. What do you think, sir? I think the Zilani are dying while we debate politics, Cooper said firmly. But I also know that defying the Council could destroy everything we've built in space. Our trade agreements, our colonies, our research partnerships. All of it could be gone. Kate understood the problem. Humans were still the newest members of galactic civilization. They depended on other species for many things. But sometimes, being right was more important than being safe. Secretary of Defense Amy Barnes entered Cooper's office during their conversation. She looked upset. Mr. President, I've just received word from our ambassador to the Council. Counselor Thane has made it clear that any human ship entering Zilani space will be considered an act of war against the Council's authority. And what does that mean, exactly? Cooper asked. Barnes sat down heavily. It means they could cut off all trade with human worlds. It means they could revoke our membership in the Council. It means our colonies could be left defenseless if anyone decides to attack them. On the other side of Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez was working in her laboratory. As Earth's chief medical officer, she had access to all the information about the Zilani plague. What she was discovering made her very worried. Elena called her assistant, Dr. Mark Peterson, to her office. Mark, I need you to look at these genetic patterns from the Zilani plague samples. Mark studied the data for several minutes. His face grew pale as he understood what he was seeing. Dr. Vasquez, this disease is too perfect. It targets every single aspect of Zilani biology. It's like someone studied their DNA for years and then designed the perfect weapon against them. That's exactly what I think happened, Elena said. But there's something else. Look at these mutation patterns. Mark looked closer at the data. Oh no, it's learning. The disease is adapting as it spreads. Elena nodded grimly. And if it continues to adapt, it might eventually be able to attack other carbon-based life forms, including humans. Back on Luna Station, Kate was receiving reports from her ship captains. The Meridian was still racing toward Zilani space, but other human vessels were being stopped by Council ships. Captain Lavra Mitchell of the supply ship Horizon had been forced to turn back when 3 Korath destroyers surrounded her vessel. Captain Tyler Brooks of the escort ship Defiant had been warned that any attempt to reach Zilani space would result in his ship being destroyed. Admiral, said Commander Nina Price over the communication system, this is wrong. The Zilani have helped everyone. Now they're dying, and everyone is just watching it happen. Kate agreed, but she also understood the bigger picture. If humans helped the Zilani and were punished for it, other species might learn the wrong lesson. They might think that helping others only led to trouble. President Cooper made his decision during a meeting with his full cabinet. Trade Minister Paul Henderson had spent 2 hours explaining all the economic reasons why humans should not help the Zilani. The numbers were frightening. Earth could lose billions of credits in trade income. But Dr. Vasquez presented a different kind of number. Mr. President, if this plague continues to mutate, it could eventually threaten all life in the galaxy. The Zilani are just the first target. How long do we have? Cooper asked. If my calculations are correct, maybe 6 months before the plague could start affecting other species. Maybe less. Cooper looked around the room at his advisors. Some of them still thought Earth should stay out of the crisis. Others were starting to understand that this was bigger than politics. Dr. Vasquez, what would we need to do to help the Zilani? Elena had been preparing for this question. We would need to get our best medical teams to Zilani space. We would need to bring research equipment and supplies. and we would need to work directly with the surviving Zilani scientists. All of which requires breaking the Council's quarantine, Barnes pointed out. Cooper stood up and walked to the window. He could see the lights of Earth's cities below. Millions of people lived down there, trusting their leaders to make the right decisions. 40 years ago, my grandfather fought in the Luna War, Cooper said quietly. He told me something I've never forgotten. He said that history doesn't remember the people who played it safe. History remembers the people who did what was right, even when it was hard. He turned back to face his advisors. We're going to help the Zilani. I don't care what it costs us. Secretary Barnes looked worried. Sir, this could destroy our position in the galaxy. Amy, our position in the galaxy. Won't matter if everyone in the galaxy is dead, Cooper replied. Dr. Vasquez, how quickly can you assemble a medical team? I can have 50 of our best doctors and scientists ready to leave within 24 hours. Do it. Admiral Sullivan, I want you to prepare a fleet to escort our medical ships to Zilani. Space. Kate nodded. How many ships, sir? All of them. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. The meeting ended, and Cooper's advisors left to begin preparations. But Cooper stayed behind with Dr. Vasquez. Elena, tell me honestly, do you think we can save them? Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. I don't know, sir. The Zilani are the best healers in the galaxy, and they can't cure themselves. But sometimes, being an outsider gives you a different perspective. Sometimes, being primitive means you try things that advanced people think are too simple to work. Cooper smiled for the first time in days. Then let's be primitive. Within hours, news of Earth's decision spread throughout human space. Some people were excited that their government was doing the right thing. Others were terrified that humanity was about to be thrown out of galactic civilization. On Luna Station, Kate watched as ships began arriving from all over human space. Medical vessels, supply ships, escort destroyers, and even some civilian ships whose owners wanted to help. It was the largest human fleet ever assembled. But she also watched the reports coming in from Council space. The Korath Empire was moving their biggest warships toward the routes to Zilani space. The Vex Consortium was threatening to end all trade with human worlds. Admiral, said Alex Turner, we're receiving messages from Council species. They're all saying the same thing. If we help the Zilani, we'll be alone in the galaxy. Kate looked at the fleet assembling outside the station. Ships from Earth, Mars, the asteroid colonies, and dozens of other human settlements. They had come together to help people they had never met, people who couldn't do anything for them in return. Alex, she said, maybe being alone isn't the worst thing that could happen to us. Maybe the worst thing would be becoming the kind of people who watch others die and do nothing about it. The human fleet began moving toward Zilani space, carrying hope to a species that the rest of the galaxy had decided to abandon. The human fleet moved through space like a river of lights against the darkness. Commander Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Meridian as dozens of ships traveled together toward Zilani space. He had never seen so many human vessels. In one place, Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the fleet from her flagship, the Defender. Next to her traveled the medical ship Nightingale, commanded by Dr. Lisa Crawford. The escort destroyer Defiant, under Captain Tyler Brooks, moved alongside them like a protective guard dog. But as they got closer to their destination, the danger became real. Long-range sensors showed Korath Empire ships waiting for them. Korath had built a wall of warships around Zilani space. Their dreadnoughts were 3 times the size of the largest human vessel. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Beth Williams from the communications station, we're receiving a transmission from the Korath blockade commander. Kate nodded. Put it through to all ships in the fleet. The voice that came through the speakers was cold and threatening. Human vessels, This is Admiral Varix of the Korath Fifth Fleet. You are approaching a restricted area. Turn back immediately or face the consequences. Kate activated her own transmitter. Admiral Varix, this is Admiral Sullivan of the Earth Deep Space Fleet. We are carrying medical supplies and personnel to assist with the crisis in Zelani space. We request safe passage. Varix's response came quickly. Your request is denied. The Council has voted. No ships are allowed to enter or leave Zelani space. This is your final warning. Jake studied the sensor readings. The Korath had positioned their ships to cover every possible route to the Zelani system. Their weapons were charged and ready. It looked impossible to get through. Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez had been working on the problem for hours. He called Jake to the engineering section of the ship. Commander, I think I found something, Sam said, pointing to his computer screen. The Korath are using a standard blockade formation. It's very strong, but it has one weakness. What kind of weakness? Sam showed Jake a three-dimensional map of the Korath positions. They're positioned to stop ships coming from the main. Travel routes. But there's a gap here, near the system's third moon. The problem is, there's a lot of radiation in that area. Most ships avoid it because it can damage their systems. But not if we modify our shields? Exactly. I can adjust our shield frequencies to protect us from the radiation. The Korath probably don't expect anyone to try coming through there. Jake called Admiral Sullivan with the plan. She listened carefully, then spoke with her senior officers. The plan was risky, but it might be their only chance. All ships. This is Admiral Sullivan. We're going to attempt to enter Zelani space through the radiation field near the third moon. Chief Rodriguez will transmit the shield modifications to all vessels. Lieutenant Alex Martin, the fleet's navigation officer, had been studying the area around the Zelani system. He discovered something that made the plan even better. Admiral, there's a solar storm building near the system's star. If we time our approach correctly, the storm will create additional interference that will help hide us from Korath sensors. The human fleet changed course, moving away from the main blockade and toward the dangerous radiation field. The Korath ships followed their movement, but stayed at a safe distance from the radiation. Dr. Crawford prepared her medical team for what they might find in Zelani space. She had studied everything available about the plague, but she knew the real situation would be much worse than any report could describe. Dr. Peterson, she said to her assistant, make sure all our medical equipment is ready for immediate deployment. From what we know about this plague, we'll need to start working the moment we arrive. The medical team included 50 of Earth's best doctors and scientists. They had volunteered for the mission, knowing they might never return home. The plague was too dangerous and too unknown. Captain Tyler Brooks positioned his destroyer at the front of the fleet as they approached the radiation field. If there were any hidden dangers, his ship would encounter them first. All stop, Brooks ordered as they reached the edge of the radiation field. Let the engineers complete the shield. Modifications. Across the fleet, human engineers worked to adjust their ship's protective systems. The modifications were based on Sam Rodriguez's calculations, but they had never been tested under real conditions. Fleet Command, this is Chief Rodriguez. Shield. Modifications are complete. All ships report ready. Admiral Sullivan gave the order. All ships, proceed into the radiation field. Maintain formation and watch for Korath patrols. The human fleet entered the dangerous area around the third moon. The radiation was intense, but the modified shields held. The ships moved slowly and carefully, trying not to attract attention. Commander Morrison watched the sensor displays as they traveled through the field. The radiation created strange patterns on the screens, making it hard to see clearly. But it also meant the Korath couldn't see them clearly either. Halfway through the radiation field, Lieutenant Williams detected Korath ships moving toward their position. "Admiral, we have 3 Korath cruisers approaching from the starboard side. Hold position," Sullivan ordered. "Let's see if they can actually find us in all this interference." The Korath ships moved closer, their sensors sweeping the area. The human fleet stayed perfectly still, hoping their modified shields would hide them from detection. For 20 minutes, the Korath ships searched the radiation field. They came within a few thousand kilometers of the human fleet, but never found them. Finally, they gave up and returned to their patrol routes. "All ships resume course," Sullivan ordered quietly as they emerged from the radiation field. The human fleet got their first look at Zelani space. What they saw broke their hearts. The Zelani had built their civilization around living planets. Their cities were actually giant plants that grew into buildings and starships. From space, a healthy Zelani world looked like a garden of incredible beauty. But the worlds they saw now were dying. The great plant cities were turning brown and black. Many of them had collapsed completely. The few Zelani ships in orbit were dark and powerless. "My God," whispered Dr. Crawford as she looked at the sensor readings. "The plague has destroyed almost everything." Commander Morrison established communication with the largest Zelani settlement on the main planet. It took several minutes to get a response, and when it came, the voice was weak and filled with despair. "Unknown ships, this is Elder Sage Photon. Please identify yourselves. We have no energy to fight if you come to attack us." Jake quickly responded. "Elder Sage, this is Commander Morrison of the human fleet. We have come to help you fight the plague. We bring medical supplies and doctors." There was a long silence. Then Photon's voice came back, filled with disbelief. "Humans? But the Council forbade anyone to enter our space. Why have you come?" "Because you would have come to help us," Jake replied simply. Dr. Crawford and her medical team immediately began preparing to go down to the planet's surface. The readings showed that the atmosphere was still safe for humans, but they would need to wear protective suits to avoid catching the plague. Admiral Sullivan deployed her ships around the Zelani system to watch for Korath patrols. She knew it wouldn't be long before the blockade forces discovered that the human fleet had gotten through. Captain Brooks took his destroyer on a patrol of the outer system. What he found was even more disturbing. Hidden among the asteroids were monitoring stations, watching everything that happened in Zelani space. "Admiral, these monitoring stations have Vex Consortium markings," Brooks reported. "They've been watching the Zelani die." This discovery made Dr. Crawford even more suspicious about the nature of the plague. The Vex Consortium were traders and business people. They rarely got involved in military actions, but they were very interested in profitable opportunities. "Commander Morrison," Dr. Crawford called from the medical bay, "I need to get down to the planet immediately. I want to work directly with the surviving Zelani scientists. If we're going to find a cure, we need to understand exactly how this plague works." Jake organized the first landing party. Dr. Crawford led the medical team, while a group of Marines provided security. They didn't expect trouble from the Zelani, but they wanted to be prepared for anything. As the landing shuttle approached the Zelani planet, they could see the devastation up close. Entire cities had been reduced to rotting plant matter. Rivers that had once run clear were now filled with the debris of dead vegetation. But in underground shelters, they found the survivors. Thousands of Zelani had managed to avoid the worst of the plague by hiding in natural caves and artificial bunkers. Elder Sage Photon was among the survivors. He was an ancient Zelani, over 400 years old, with bark-like skin and leaves that had turned gray with age and sickness. "Dr. Crawford," Photon said through a translation device, "we have tried everything we know. Our greatest healers have died trying to cure this plague. I do not understand how humans, who are so young in the ways of medicine, think they can succeed where we have failed. Dr. Crawford looked around at the dying Zilani in the shelter. Elder Sage, sometimes being young means we haven't learned what's supposed to be impossible. Sometimes we try things that experienced people know won't work. And sometimes those things work anyway. She set up her equipment. Dr. Lisa Crawford had been working for 36 hours straight. In the underground laboratory, she had set up with the surviving Zilani scientists. She studied the plague samples under every type of scanner available. The results were both horrifying and hopeful. Dr. Peterson, she called to her assistant, look at these genetic patterns. The plague is definitely artificial, but there's something else here. Dr. Mark Peterson joined her at the main analysis station. The Zilani scientist healer Nexus worked beside them, sharing everything he knew about his people's biology. The plague attacks the Zilani's photosynthetic systems first, Crawford explained. It prevents them from processing sunlight into energy. But watch what happens when I introduce human blood samples. She ran the test, and the results appeared on the screen. The plague tried to attack the human blood cells, but couldn't get a strong hold on them. Human immune systems are chaotic, Nexus observed. Your species has survived so many diseases on your home world. You have defenses we never needed to develop. Crawford nodded. Exactly. We're not immune to this plague, but our bodies fight it differently. Our immune systems are used to dealing with aggressive, fast-changing diseases. Above ground, Commander Jake Morrison was coordinating the relief effort. Human supply ships were delivering food, water, and medical supplies too. Zilani survivors across the planet. It was dangerous work, as the plague had made many areas completely uninhabitable. Captain Lavra Mitchell commanded the supply operations from her ship, the Horizon. She had experience managing large-scale humanitarian missions from her work with Earth's disaster relief programs. Commander Morrison, Mitchell reported, we've located 17 more survivor shelters. But many of them are in areas where the plague concentration is extremely high. We'll need full environmental suits for any rescue operations. Jake approved the rescue missions, but he knew time was running out. Admiral Sullivan had reported that more Korath ships were moving toward the Zilani system. Soon, the human fleet would be discovered and forced to fight or flee out in the laboratory. Dr. Crawford made a breakthrough that would change everything. She had been studying how human immune systems responded to small amounts of the plague virus. The key is controlled exposure, she explained to Elder Sage Foten. If we can introduce tiny amounts of the plague into human volunteers, their immune systems will learn to fight it. Then we can use their antibodies to create a cure. Foten was concerned. Dr. Crawford, you would be risking human lives to save Zilani lives. This does not seem fair to us. Elder Sage, this plague won't stop with your people. It's already mutating. If we don't stop it here, it will eventually spread to other species. We're fighting for everyone's survival. The plan was dangerous. Human volunteers would have to allow themselves to be infected with a controlled amount of the plague. Their immune systems would fight the infection, hopefully producing the antibodies needed for a cure. But some of the volunteers might die in the process. Commander Morrison was the first to volunteer. Dr. Crawford, if we're asking others to risk their lives, I should be willing to do the same. Within hours, over 200 humans had volunteered for the experimental treatment. They came from every ship in the fleet, doctors, engineers, Marines, and even some civilian volunteers who had joined the mission. Captain Tyler Brooks of the Defiant was among the volunteers. My ship can manage without me for a few days, he said. But the galaxy can't manage without the Zilani. Dr. Crawford set up the treatment facility in the largest Zilani shelter. She would monitor each volunteer carefully, watching how their immune systems responded to the plague exposure. The first group of 20 volunteers received the treatment. Among them was Lieutenant Alex Martin. the navigation officer who had found the path through the Korath blockade. For the first 12 hours, nothing happened. Then the volunteers began to show symptoms. They developed fevers, their skin became pale, and they grew weak. Dr. Crawford monitored their blood constantly, looking for signs that their immune systems were fighting back. "Their white blood cell counts are increasing," she reported to Commander Morrison. "Their bodies are recognizing the plague as a threat and producing antibodies." But the process was not easy. Several volunteers became seriously ill. Dr. Peterson worked around the clock to keep them stable while their immune systems battled the plague. On the third day, Lieutenant Martin showed the first signs of recovery. His fever broke, and his blood. Tests showed high levels of antibodies against the plague virus. "We have our first success," Dr. Crawford announced. "But we need more volunteers to produce enough antibodies for a large-scale cure." Word of the breakthrough spread through the human fleet. More volunteers came forward, even though they had seen how sick the first group had become. Engineer Sam Rodriguez was in the second group of volunteers. "My grandmother survived the Earth plague of 2387, he said. "She always told me that sometimes you have to get sick to help others get well." While the medical experiments continued, Admiral Sullivan received disturbing news. Captain Brooks, monitoring the edge of the system, reported that a large Korath battle fleet was approaching. "Admiral, we have 15 Korath dreadnoughts moving toward our position. They'll be here in 6 hours." Sullivan faced an impossible choice. She could order the fleet to retreat, saving her ships but abandoning the Zelani. Or she could stay and fight, knowing that the human fleet would be destroyed by the superior Korath forces. "All ships, prepare for battle," Sullivan ordered. "We came here to help the Zelani, and we're not leaving until the job is done." In the laboratory, Dr. Crawford worked frantically to produce the cure. The volunteers' antibodies were working, but she needed more time to synthesize enough medicine for all the surviving Zelani. Dr. Crawford called Healer Nexus. "I have studied your human volunteers. Their recovery rate is remarkable, but I am concerned about the Korath fleet approaching." "How long do you need to distribute the cure?" asked Commander Morrison. "At least 12 hours to produce enough for the survivors on this planet. Another day to reach all the Zelani colonies." Morrison calculated the timing. The Korath fleet would arrive in 6 hours. Even if the human fleet could delay them there, wouldn't be enough time to complete the cure distribution. "What if we don't wait for mass production?" asked Dr. Peterson. "What if we take the antibodies directly from the volunteers and give them to the sickest Zelani immediately?" Dr. Crawford considered this. "It's risky. We don't know how much antibody each volunteer can safely donate, but it might be our only chance." The volunteers were asked to donate blood for direct transfusion to dying Zelani. Despite their weakness from fighting the plague, every single volunteer agreed. Commander Morrison was the first to donate, as his blood was prepared for transfusion. He spoke to Elder Sage Photon. "Elder Sage, I want you to know that humans don't expect anything in return for this help. We're doing this because it's right." Photon was quiet for a moment. "Commander Morrison, in 400 years of life, I have seen many species in this galaxy. Most of them help others only when they can gain something. Your people are different." The first transfusions began. Zelani, who had been dying for weeks, suddenly began to show signs of recovery. Their bark-like skin regained color, and their leaf formations began to heal. But time was running out. The Korath fleet was only 3 hours away, and the human ships were preparing for a battle they could not win. Dr. Crawford called Admiral Sullivan over the communication system. "Whatever you're going to do, you need to do it fast. We can't hold off the Korath fleet for long." Dr. Crawford looked around the laboratory at the volunteers giving their blood to save an alien species. She looked at the Zelani scientists working beside human doctors as equals. She looked at the cure taking shape in her hands. "We're going to make it work," she said firmly. "Commander Morrison, I need every volunteer who can safely donate blood to do so now. We're going to save as many Zelani as we can before the Korath arrive." The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. Human volunteers donated blood, while Zelani medical workers prepared the transfusions. The cure was working better than anyone had hoped. Zelani who had been near death were recovering within hours of receiving human antibodies. Elder Sage Photon was among the first to receive the treatment. As his strength returned, he helped coordinate the distribution of the cure to other survivors. "Dr. Crawford," he said, "your people have given us more than life. You have given us hope." Captain Lara Mitchell had been working to synthesize the cure in larger quantities. Her ship's manufacturing facilities had been converted into a medicine production center. "Dr. Crawford, we've produced enough cure for about half the survivors on this planet. If we had another day, we could save them all. But they didn't have another day." The Korath fleet was approaching fast, and Admiral Sullivan was preparing. Her ships for battle. Commander Morrison made a decision that surprised everyone. "Dr. Crawford, take a small team and as much cure as you can carry. Get to the other Zelani colonies. Don't wait for us." "I'm not leaving the volunteers," Crawford replied. "They're still sick from the treatment. They need medical care." "The volunteers knew the risks when they signed up," Morrison said gently. "But if you stay here, all their sacrifice will be wasted. You need." 3 months after the cure had been distributed, Elder Sage Photon stood in the rebuilt council chamber on the Zelani homeworld. The great plant city around him was growing again, green and healthy. But this was not the same council chamber that had once served the Galactic Council. This was something new. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber, but these were not the powerful empires that had dominated galactic politics for centuries. These were the small nations, the oppressed peoples, and the forgotten. Colonies that had been pushed aside by the major powers. Admiral Kate Sullivan sat at the main table as the representative of humanity. Next to her sat Captain Lara Mitchell, who had been promoted after her excellent work coordinating the medical relief efforts. Dr. Lisa Crawford was there as the chief medical officer of what everyone was calling the Alliance. "Friends, Elder," Sage Photon began, his voice carried by translators to every species in the chamber. 3 months ago, the galaxy watched our people die. The council that claimed to represent all civilized species turned their backs on us in our greatest need. He paused, looking around at the gathered representatives. But humanity did not turn their backs. They risked everything to save us, even though we could offer them nothing in return. Commander Jake Morrison had been promoted to captain after the Zelani mission. He now commanded a joint human-Zelani exploration ship, one of many new vessels being built to serve the Alliance. "Elder Sage," said Captain Nina Price of the exploration ship Pioneer, "we didn't help the Zelani expecting gratitude. We helped because it was right. And that," Photon replied, "is why you are different from the old powers." The Alliance had grown quickly. The Meridians, crystalline beings who had been enslaved by the Korath Empire, were the first to join after the Zelani. Their representative, Crystal Singer Keth, had brought disturbing news about Korath mining operations that destroyed entire worlds. The Vexian refugees had been next. Their homeworld had been taken over by Vex Consortium mining operations, and millions of Vexians now lived in refugee camps throughout the galaxy. Captain Tyler Brooks had led the mission to evacuate 3 more Vexian settlements before the Vex could destroy them. "The old council claims to represent order and stability," said Vexian leader Rex during one of the Alliance meetings. "But their order is built on the suffering of the weak." Dr. Crawford had continued her medical research with Zelani scientists. Together, they had made discoveries that amazed the entire scientific community. Human adaptability combined with Zelani medical knowledge was creating new treatments for diseases that had been considered incurable. "We've learned something important," Dr. Crawford reported to the Alliance Council. "When species work together as equals, they can achieve things that neither could accomplish alone." The old Galactic Council was not happy about the Alliance's growth. They had tried economic sanctions, but the Alliance members traded mostly with each other now. They had tried diplomatic pressure, but the Alliance species had already been excluded. From real power in the old system, President Dan Cooper had faced enormous pressure on Earth. Some politicians wanted to abandon the Alliance and try to make peace with the old Council, but the majority of humans supported their government's decision. "We knew there would be consequences," Cooper said during a speech to the Earth Assembly. "But we also knew that doing nothing would have consequences too. History will judge which." Choice was right. The Alliance's biggest test came when the Korath Empire tried to reclaim the Meridian slaves. A Korath battle fleet arrived at the Crystal Worlds, demanding that the Meridians return to their mining operations. Admiral Sullivan commanded the Alliance fleet that responded to the crisis. Ships from 6 different species worked together to face the Korath threat. "Korath fleet, this is Admiral Sullivan of the Alliance Defense Force," she transmitted. "The Meridians are free people now. You have no authority here." The Korath Admiral Varix, the same one who had tried to stop the humans from reaching Zelani space, responded angrily. "The Meridians are property of the Korath Empire. Stand down or face destruction. The only thing that will be destroyed here is the idea that people can be property," Sullivan replied. The battle that followed was different from anything the galaxy had seen before. The Alliance ships didn't fight like the rigid military formations of the old powers. They fought like a family protecting each other. Human ships used their speed and adaptability to confuse the Korath formations. Zelani bioships healed damage to Alliance vessels during the battle. Meridian crystal ships created energy shields that protected the entire fleet. The Korath fleet, despite being larger and more powerful, found itself outmaneuvered and overwhelmed. For the first time in centuries, a Korath military force was forced to retreat. "This changes everything," said Captain Mitchell as she watched the Korath ships flee. "The old powers aren't invincible anymore." News of the Alliance victory spread throughout the galaxy. Oppressed peoples on 100 worlds began to hope that change was possible. Some of the minor species in the old council started sending secret messages to the Alliance, asking about membership. But the victory also brought new dangers. The Vex Consortium began funding pirate groups to attack Alliance trade ships. The Altarian Republic, embarrassed by their earlier abandonment of the Zelani, began building up their military forces. "They're afraid," observed Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner, who now served as Alliance Intelligence Chief. The old powers built their authority on the idea that they were the only ones capable of maintaining order. "We've proven that's not true." Elder Sage Photon had become something like the spiritual leader of the Alliance. During a gathering of all member species, he shared a story that became famous throughout Alliance space. "Long ago," he said, "there was a great forest fire that threatened all the animals. The mighty elephants and strong lions fled to safety, but a small hummingbird began carrying drops of water to fight the fire. The other animals laughed and said, 'What can you possibly accomplish?' The hummingbird replied, 'I am doing what I can.'" He looked around at the representatives of species that had been dismissed as weak or primitive by the old powers. "Humanity was the hummingbird that carried water to fight our fire. Now we are all hummingbirds, and together we carry enough water to put out any fire." The Alliance continued to grow. The Nexari, explorers from the galaxy's edge, brought new knowledge about unknown regions of space. The Kellen, underwater dwellers whose worlds had been polluted by Vex mining, brought expertise in environmental restoration. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as the Alliance's chief medical research coordinator, made a discovery that shocked everyone. While studying the original plague samples, she found proof that the disease had been created by Vex Consortium scientists. "The genetic markers are clear," she reported to the Alliance Council. "The Vex didn't just stand by and watch the Zilani die. They caused the plague in the first place." This revelation changed how the galaxy viewed the Zilani crisis. It hadn't been a natural disaster that the old council had failed to prevent. It had been an act of genocide that the old council had helped cover up. Captain Morrison, now commanding the Alliance flagship Meridian II, led the mission to present this evidence to the remaining neutral species in the galaxy. The proof was overwhelming, and several more species left the old council to join the Alliance. "The old order is crumbling," reported Captain Brooks during an Alliance strategy meeting, "but they won't give up power without a fight." As the Alliance grew stronger, the old council became more desperate. They began talking about a final military action to crush the rebellious species once and for all, but they had misunderstood something fundamental about the Alliance. It wasn't built on fear or greed like the old council. It was built on the simple idea that all intelligent species deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Admiral Sullivan stood on the observation deck of the new Alliance headquarters, built in the space between the human and Zilani home systems. Ships from dozens of species moved through space around her, working together as naturally as if they had been allies for centuries. "Admiral," said Commander Peterson, now her aide, "we're receiving reports that more species want to join the Alliance. The old council is losing members every week." Sullivan smiled as she watched a human supply ship working alongside a Meridian crystal hauler to deliver medical supplies to a refugee settlement. A year ago, these species had barely known each other existed. "You know what the most amazing thing is?" she said. "We didn't set out to change the galaxy. We just set out to help some people who needed help." The old Galactic Council still existed, but it was no longer the dominant force in galactic politics. The Alliance had shown that there was another way, a better way to organize civilized society, and at the center of it all were the humans, the young species that had been dismissed as too primitive to matter. They had become the heart of something new, something that valued cooperation over domination and compassion over profit. The galaxy had turned its back on the Zilani in their time of need, but humanity had stood by them, and in doing so, had changed the course of galactic history. Forever. As Elder Sage Photon often said in his speeches to new Alliance members, sometimes the greatest strength comes no